Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And I'm conscious that there are people from different countries, different continents, different time zones. So thank you for joining us today for our 8th Perspectives event and part of our Perspective online series. At Vyntelligence, we like to celebrate the innovation that occurs at the intersection of different disciplines, different industries. And today we are delighted to bring you a very illustrious panel from four very different but related industries, three different countries, and leaders who have charted their own paths to leadership. In the past, we have covered a range of topics, including demystifying AI, thoughtful versus big data, the power of the human voice in the digital age, rethinking the box, is automation truly transformational, and freedom despite restrictions. So today's topic is a sustainable health and safety culture, combining the human and digital. And this is a topic very, very close to our heart. It's also close to our co-founder and CEO, Kapil Singhal's heart. A big shout out to him for the conviction and commitment in getting the entire intelligence team from across three different continents. Yes, our teams are in three different continents, five different time zones, and 13 different nationalities together on this topic, right? So we all know that 2020 was a bit of a stressful year for everyone, and health and safety concerns were on everyone's minds in both our personal and professional lives. Enterprises scrambled to adapt with the majority of employees working remotely. Consequently, novel workflows and processes were and are still being put in place, keeping the safety of employees front and center. Acknowledging the problem has been difficult, and we acknowledge that the problem is difficult. And even though there is deep expertise among practitioners, there are challenges to overcome. Fundamentally, a hard problem, health, safety, and environmental management is complex and challenging, and even harder for industries where work is done in uncertain conditions, perilous working environments, and work being relied on contractors who are not necessarily your employees, who you can train and equip them. And add to that the inexperience or the overconfidence or process fatigue and regulatory restrictions due to the pandemic. The problem is complex. Today, what we will do is we will examine the links between culture, safety, and sustainability, and the role of technology in shaping this. We will also endeavor to understand the decisions business leaders in regulated industries and essential services need to take to create a more sustainable way of building a proactive safety culture. And on that note, I'd like to introduce our illustrious panels. And I'm going to start by, I can see Chris right ahead. And I'm going to start with Chris. And Chris Train, OBE, Senior Executive, and previously CEO at Cadent Gas. Chris is an experienced Chief Executive Officer with a demonstrated track record of working in the energy and utilities industry. Skilled in business transformation, Chris has established himself as a strong business, community, and social services professional. As a global leader, Chris has provided direction to the government, the regulator, and businesses, and has sat on various European and international committees. Chris is also recognized for his transformational leadership and outstanding services to the gas and energy industry, and has been at the center of several fundamental changes to the way the UK's gas network is structured and operates. I welcome Chris. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you very much. We look forward to hearing from you. I'm going to move to Nigel because he's in the UK, like Chris, and I think not too far from each other. Both are in the north of the UK. And Nigel Watson, CIO, Northumbrian Water. He is an energetic and globally experienced business-focused technology professional, and he holds an excellent track record of success within the fast-changing global organizations. He turns high-level strategy into actionable programs, which I love, and has driven execution in everything that he has done. Nigel has worked in business and IT roles across a range of competitive industries for more than 30 years. And his work experience includes leadership of transformational programs for leading organizations, including GE Capital, Microsoft, Travelport, and Vodafone, often across the globe. So very varied industry experience. He's been with Northumbrian Water Group since 2015, and in 2016, Nigel took up the role of CIO at Northumbrian Water Group, and he's responsible for the innovation strategy and execution across the group. He is also co-chair of their retail joint venture, WAVE, and is a member of CBI's Innovation Council. Thank you very much, Nigel, and welcome for the event. Moving on to France, to Paris to be precise, Jaydeep Sandhu, Head of Technical Expertise and Projects Operational Department at Engie. With over 32 years of international and multicultural experience in different areas of the power generation industry, Jaydeep has proven to be a highly valued and respected leader. He has overseen a range of areas from operations and maintenance, performance monitoring and efficiency, rehabilitation and renovation, asset management, engineering, and business development. Currently based with Engie in France, Jaydeep's experience spans several countries and reputable companies, namely National Power, International Power UK, and NTPC India as well. Thank you, Jaydeep, for joining us, and welcome. And finally, Mayank Sharma, Chief Data Officer at Vyntelligence. I have a joke to tell you. He kept thinking that I think of his name as Mayank Mehta. No, I know you are Mayank Sharma, right? Okay. Mayank describes himself as a researcher, engineer, data scientist, systems thinker, and problem solver, all related into one. He has a broad portfolio of business impact within complex and uncertain environments and has built upon a strong theoretical training. He brings this expertise in using AI to solve organization level business problems, to create software and systems that help solve learning, reasoning, and planning problems for enterprises. This includes worrying about how data and knowledge are captured, distilled, organized, and instrumented to be readily available to people, and automated systems for faster decision making and action. Welcome, Mayank, and thank you for waking up so early. Mayank is in Houston, and I think it's some 6 in the morning or whatever there it is. Thank you so much, Mayank. So
Thanks.
on that note, I'd like to get the event started. So just a bit of housekeeping. Please use the chat function to share your questions. We will open up the panel for questions today, and we will try our best to answer as many as possible. And if not, we will be putting out a blog with the answers of questions that have been left unanswered. And we hope you'll have a fantastic time. And keep yourself on mute if possible. And let's get started. So this is a panel style kind of an event. So I'll be posing questions to different panelists, and let's get started. And this is a question to anyone from the panel who wants to pick it up first, right? And so my first question is, safety has been quite paramount for the industries that all of you have led. And how has the current business environment, and I mean, the post-COVID or the COVID and beyond kind of environment, impacted leadership priorities?
I think it's been very interesting how organizations have had to adapt the way that they operate and the way that they work, and using technology to do that. And by that, I don't just mean the way that we have this kind of meeting. I think one of the critical things for me, though, is that the technology is enabling a very transactional business. And we need to find ways of bringing back creativity into the enterprise, because enterprises are becoming very transactional. And also, particularly with new recruits into an organization without that human contact, I think we're losing that sense of belonging that people have to organizations, and how you generate a culture for the organization. So I think the ways of working have been just absolutely fantastic in terms of their innovation, but we need to carry on and move forward and manage some of those things that aren't working as well in this kind of environment.
Yeah, that's a very, very relevant point. Anybody else want to respond to the question or to Chris? Go ahead, Jay.
So I very much agree with Chris in terms of the lack of human contact, especially for new starters and also for a lot of our colleagues. So, but the companies, as he rightly pointed out, have managed the process very well. lot of action was taken. The internet has held up. People have been able to work from remote very well. The digitalization of the industry, in our industry particularly, we've been able to operate all our assets from remote. Where we needed to have people present, we've been able to manage the social distancing requirements, etc., extremely well with very, very low infection rates amongst 170,000 staff. So that's been managed very, very well. What has gone missing is this element of human contact, the creativity, and the synergies which you create by working together. So there are certain things which we are beginning to do now. So in some locations, we are beginning to get back to the office in limited numbers, 1 day a week or something, and have people to physically interact. Also, what we are encouraging is to make people meet outside the office in open spaces where you're permitted to do so. So for example, my colleagues who live in the neighborhood, we actually go out for a forest walk on a Sunday morning. And we spend the first half an hour purely talking about how we are feeling about the different things and keep it more social. And then over the next half an hour or so, we can talk about different things related to work, and then chill out again in the end with some personal conversation. So I think this type of adaptation and all is essential to do, at least for the near future. What concerns me more is the younger generation, who, for example, I've got 2 interns in my team who I've never met face to face so far. I'll be seeing the first one this Tuesday. And they've been working for 2 months. So they are part of the company, but they don't know who they work for. They do not know the culture. They do not know what is really expected of them in some ways and what they can actually gain from all of this contact. So I think it's important to get those people more involved.
Yeah, very, very valid point. So that leaves me to request Nigel if he had any thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you asked the question about health and safety and how that changed with the pandemic. And I think the biggest thing for us, so we obviously had to keep the services running, so keep the water flowing because it's a critical service. And it was making sure that our employees and our customers felt safe. So that there are moments when we come into contact with the public, and there are jobs that we have to do where we have to send 2 people out. So we sort of really focused in on those things that would be problematic or potentially problematic to us, with the need to observe social distancing. So I mean, I guess not a technology thing really, but we hired some extra vans, right? So we went, okay, our workers need to be able to go to these jobs individually now. They cannot do, even if 2 of them are going to the same place, they have to go separately. We took a lot of steps, and you'll know we work very much with your technology to reduce the need for home visits. So, and that was something we deployed, very quickly in about 6 weeks at the point when pandemic struck. And that enabled our customers to actually record an incident. And so if it was a leak or a flood, and we were able to look at the severity of that, and in some cases talk the customer through fixing it themselves. That reduced our need to go and visit customers' homes and potentially be causing a alarm, or even worse, perhaps spreading the disease. We reduced those home visits by about 30 or 40%. So I think, I mean, I readily agree with what Jardeep and Chris have said about the pandemic, and its impact has fallen very unevenly on organizations and individuals. But I guess, our focus went to those people who were being out in the field and our customers who might come into contact with them. And that was really where we prioritized our efforts.
Yeah, thank you, Nigel. Mike, I'll come back to you in a moment, but I have another question for Chris, if you can just, hold on. Chris, given, this context of people, contact, safety and stuff like that, and also reducing the need for home visits, and given your breadth of experience in health and safety, both at the operational and at the policy level, what do you see as the linkages between sustainability and a proactive safety culture?
Thank you, Marla. It's a really good question. And, just repeating part of the previous, the pandemic has really driven organizations to embrace new ways of doing business. And that is both in the office and in the field. And technology has facilitated that tremendously. And the technology was available pre-pandemic, but that catalyst for change really organizations have embraced. I think organizations, particularly utilities, are quite resistant to change. And, getting over that first hurdle, once a change is identified and embraced, I think they're very, very good, or we are very good at delivering change, but it's getting it past that hurdle. And the thing that the pandemic did was create that imperative of the need to do things differently. It wasn't by choice. We could have made the same actions through choice pre-pandemic. And traditional safety processes are based on repeatability and compliance, and therefore are not very flexible to meeting the needs of individuals and changing dynamic situations. The same is true on that safety culture compliance. And a coaching culture works more constructively and is more sustainable than a penalty-based culture. A proactive safety culture, in my mind, is moving away from what happened in the past to preventing what might go wrong in the future, and where the health and safety function of the organization provides advice rather than execution in health and safety. But to achieve this, you need good data and the ability to apply intelligence to that data. I mean, one of the things that organizations have done historically is just gather more and more sheets of paper, more and more ticks in boxes. And what that doesn't do is it doesn't provide intelligence, and it doesn't provide insights in a dynamic way. It becomes separate from the use itself, and it becomes separate from the people doing the work. Whereas nowadays, what we're demonstrating with these changes in technology, in my view, is that we can get much richer data sets. And so when we talk about, the Vyntelligence platforms, we're gathering more insights in a more dynamic way. And you can analyze that data in a different way to what you originally intended. And then operations can apply those insights and improve the organization. And I think you will bring along the employees of the organization as you do that. I mean, there's an old axiom, and it still sits with me very profoundly in my career, where my chief executive at the time said, good health and safety does not cost more, it costs less. And it was a profound moment, I think, in my health and safety career, because all processes need some kind of investment. And what you don't see is the cause and effect, because it is very much a cultural thing. And in my sector, we're undergoing great change at the moment to meet the challenges of net zero by 2050 in the UK. And this is a great catalyst, and therefore an opportunity for looking at things in a different way.
That's really useful, Chris. And I think I picked up on some really interesting points which talked about the need for good data and intelligence and information flowing through. So that kind of segues me nicely to Nigel, because I know, Nigel, you have a CIO, so you're probably really concerned with information, intelligence, and insights. So, and you also touched upon, Chris, about regulation and the need for change. And once the change is being decided, you kind of you're very good as an industry to move ahead on it. So my question to you, Nigel, is that we live in a very fast-paced world, right? Agility is critical. But being an essential service in a regulated industry, you probably are facing a big conundrum on delivering the innovation whilst keeping people safe and ensuring regulatory compliance, particularly in the area of workplace safety. So how have you kind of used technology to deliver this whilst navigating the regulatory frameworks as well?
Yeah, so it's true that we're heavily regulated. So I think last time I added them up, we face into 5 different regulators, and one of them is the Health and Safety Executive.
Yeah.
and probably the one that's sort of top of our list. So certainly the thing that we talk about first at exec team meetings, and also top of the agenda, the first item on the agenda when we have board meetings. And I think it's fair to say, you know, you mentioned in my intro that I own innovation in Northumbrian Water, and I did not start innovating in health and in the area of health and safety, right? I went to customer experience first, and then we gradually sort of found our way around. And one of the things I have to do as a director of this business, I mean, I have to say it's one of the best things I get to do is I do health and safety visits, and I do a couple of those a month. And in the past, I would have probably spent you know, a morning or an afternoon out in a van driving around watching somebody doing their job and chatting to them along the way, and you learn an awful lot when you do that. Obviously, we're doing those things virtually now, but as I was doing that, I sort of came to observe that actually there were, I think, opportunities to improve, and we're an organization that is committed to innovation, so we were prepared to try things out. And I engaged the person who's responsible for health and safety in the organization, and I said, I mean, the first thing we tried, honestly, was your technology in terms of things to do differently in health and safety, at least.
Yeah, the 60-second check.
And the 60-second check, yeah, which had become kind of a mantra and a thing. A big cultural shift in our business was to do a 60-second check before you did your job. As Chris sort of said, we were doing those with forms. And we thought, well, let's try it with video and see what happens. And I'll give you an example. And I think you know, examples are illuminating often, aren't they?
Yeah.
We sometimes we'll put a trailer on the back of the van, and we have to do that sort of classic check of, is the trailer safely attached? You know, can you see the number plate? Are the brake lights working, etc., etc. And we were doing that on a form, and we moved that to video. And use somebody have a phone, and they would be saying, look, the trailer is safely attached. There's good tread on the tires. You can see the number plates are clearly visible. Here, the brake lights are working. I suppose three things came from that, and seeing that observed across that and other job types. One was we had a much better audit trail. So you know, it was that you can imagine the richness of that compared to somebody ticking a form. And you know, I think we always had this suspicion that perhaps they were just ticking the boxes as well, because it does become a bit habitual, and filming something seemed to bring into play a greater level of consciousness. So so that the audit trail and the consciousness we felt were big advantages. We then observed, having done it for a few months, that people preferred video. By a matter of 8 to 1, I think it was. So when we went out and surveyed people and said, would you rather do a video or a form? 8 of them, eight times more, said they'd rather do the video. And last and certainly no means least, we are able to grab intelligence from the videos. So using speech to text and using image recognition, we were able to start to scrape off some intelligence from these video streams. So you could look at the video stream automatically using AI and go, actually, is the tread on the tires good enough? And obviously, once you've done that and you start to build up that picture of intelligence, then you can start to take some actions with it. And that's sort of where we're at right now, is working out, okay, if you can work out that the tread on the tires isn't good enough, then obviously there's something to do. The next job is to automate that, bring that trailer in and make sure it has some maintenance done on it. So you know, it's been definitely very beneficial for us as a sort of a next step of, okay, 60 seconds, do a 60-second check before everything you do. We have now embedded that in the apps that we use to distribute the work. So they don't think they're using a Vyntelligence app. They're using one of our apps, and it just happens to have an interface into Vyntelligence.
Amazing. I picked up something really interesting over there, not just the technology bit, but it's the people bit, which you spoke about, which is that you're getting people to move away from the habitual to the more conscious kind of an approach. And that is something that, you know, I'm conscious that Jaideep, you know, people is a role of people and digital innovation is probably quite critical, especially in a, you know, industry that's changing so rapidly. And for you as a business, you're moving from, you know, previous kinds of energy sources to more renewables. And for a business like you that's making very rapid stride towards net zero, What do you see as the role of people and the digital innovation in building that safety culture?
So thanks, Mala. So very, very quickly, I think I fully agree with what Chris and Nigel have articulated for the different challenges. But what I see is, so firstly, a little bit of backdrop. So when I look at 2020, Europe for the first time had more power generation from renewables than from fossil fuels, first time in history. Yeah. And I think this is only going to accelerate. You could talk about 2020 being a special year where the demand was low, but if it was not 2020, it would have happened in 2021. So we are surely moving very rapidly towards this transformation. And also the renewable assets held up very well. And why is that? The reason is that most of the renewable assets and the new net zero assets which we are building are firstly quite advanced in technology. So, they've got the state of the art digital control systems, etc., and also a lot of telemetry. Also, all our renewable assets, including the older hydro assets as well, we operate them actually from remote. So the operations are centralized in one control room somewhere, and you can manage them country by country or continent by continent. So that means the physical presence of people having to go out and work on the site for operations purposes, except for some very limited operation, is reducing quite a lot. So that means that you can keep your people more secure in the case of something like a pandemic where you don't have too many people having to work on closed sites, as we have the case in the case of thermal generation, for example. That is still the case. Maintenance, of course, is a different challenge. Maintenance is very much what we do on the ground. And for maintenance as well, with the use of digitalization, you are able to predict maintenance. So you don't have to do more frequent maintenance. In fact, we're doing lesser maintenance, and we're not causing maintenance-induced effects, etc. But it means that you can predict, you can plan, and you can do targeted maintenance, which allows you to make sure that the whole activity is carried out more safely. It also leads to a different challenge, which sometimes we talk about, that people not being on the site, maintaining regularly every day, tend to lose touch with the equipment. And so you could have a situation in which the person is not fully aware of the risks on the site, simply because he hasn't been on the site or she hasn't been on the site that frequently. So digital tools, especially video tools or something, which can actually enable what I would call as digital assistance, guidance to what you're having to do on site, would actually be a big help. So that's the next step, maybe, which will happen in the future. Right now, you can do everything electronically, and you have the method statements, etc. And then sometimes you need to do a specific risk assessment, and it prints out and tells you what to do and how to manage the risk on site. But if it is all done by video and managed, it could be even better. So those types of innovations, I think, would automatically come in, especially when we see all these things happening. And I shouldn't forget, I won't talk about the gas network. Chris is already there, but so he knows much more about gas than I do. But also what has happened in this whole current pandemic, we've seen that the digitalization of the network, the grid control, has actually worked quite well. And this is only going to accelerate. So especially when you have a lot of new variable generation being added, then you have some storage, and then you have some more dispatchable generation. How to make sure all of that is working properly to keep your network safe, to also protect the people who are working on the network so you don't have any fault somewhere which could lead to accidents, and also the citizens safe as a consequence of all of that could very well be managed with more and more digitalization taking place.
Yeah, thanks, Jaideep. I mean, what I can hear from all the conversations, it's about people, data, and intelligence. So, Mayank, I know I've not got to you as yet. So I thought, I'd kind of share. We've had some really rich conversations so far. What do you see as the link between data, proactive safety culture, and sustainability?
Oh, thanks, Mala. I would happily cede my time to the experts and keep listening to the wonderful nuggets they've given us. But what they've said has sparked a number of thoughts in my mind. So the first thought that comes to mind is that we all understand the three pillars that underpin sort of any human endeavor in terms of trying to improve our ability to do stuff, which is data, process, and culture. And data has always been around. It's not like suddenly people woke up in the 1990s and said, oh, data, and then let's start doing something. We've always had data. It's simply how has that data been used? And how have we built processes, and how has culture influenced our processes? So I'll make a few comments on each one of those dimensions. The issue with the way that data was being used was, number one, it was being used in a very retrospective fashion at a population level. So you would get insights and you would understand statistical trends, and then you would try and enact legislation or policy to try and solve certain problems. It was also very reactive, very post facto. Something happened and then you react to it and you try and figure out what went wrong. The data would sit in different silos, and so the health and safety expert would know a whole lot about something, but the plant operation manager might not know as much about the kinds of things that lead to incidents. As time moved on and we understand how data can be used to solve problems, we switched from too little data to too much data, but too much of the wrong data. We said, hey, how can I just start using some data lying around here and do something with it? Or how can I instrument the system but not have specificity around what data I'm collecting, and if I even have the algorithmic ability to extract the insights. Reactiveness has another downside to it, which is that in a fast-moving environment, if you were to enact policy that gets outdated within a matter of months because the environment is changing, then you suddenly have a problem that, well, I probably need to collect more specific data at the right time and at the right place. And the automotive example is one that's rather instructive, right? So historical data, that driving cars is obviously one of the largest events that everyone in the world participates in, but it's also one that generates a huge amount of huge number of accidents. And so historical data used to be used for laws and, how do you change equipments and mandate stuff? How do you build insurance policies? So let's take the seat belt as an example, right? Seatbelt equipment as an equipment was mandated in the US in 1968. But it took until 1984 for the very first bill or law that said, nope, everyone needs to actually use their seatbelt. In that interim, there were studies that said maybe 10 to 14% people were actually using their seatbelt. So that's where culture comes into place. You can have all the equipment, but if there isn't the appropriate regime around how do you get people to actually follow certain things, you don't get the full, the full compliance with those rules or usage of that equipment. Car seats are still a work in progress. Many countries in the world don't have car seats, and we see. So and by the way, this is where the interesting thing is. There were huge debates when seatbelts were forced upon people. So people were comparing it to sort of fascistic tendencies of society, forcing me to do something. But then culture comes into play. Well, how does culture come into play? It's about laws and enforcement. What are our attitudes? In certain countries, seatbelts are sort of just, people even they're happy to actually stick a little strip out here without it being attached to something, as long as it gets them away from a fine. Cognitive biases play a big role, and data has a big role in terms of mitigating cognitive biases. And how do we see that while we drive our cars? Some people love to thread in and thread out of different lanes while they're driving. And normalization of deviance is one of those biases that we see in the industry also, which is people start, even though there's good process in place and there's good mechanisms for monitoring things, everyone starts behaving in slightly non-compliant fashions because nothing happened. So you have this bias about, oh, everything's fine. So I can start threading between lanes, or I can drive 1 meter behind the other car and everything's fine until it's not fine. And then how do you solve that problem? And so the industry in the automotive case came up with, well, lane avoidance technology, collision avoidance technology. And the point I'm trying to make there is, it's by the use of situational data, situational awareness, where sensors are checking what you're doing right now. They're giving you the nudges, the alerts, so that even though you may relapse into your bad habits because nothing bad has happened and you don't really understand why you're being forced to do the right thing, those nudges save you from yourself when you're actually working. And so on a work site, if you can tell a worker to keep looking down to see no one is working immediately below them, you reduce the chances of them accidentally dropping something and injuring their coworker. But you can imagine how someone might forget that. And that's where I think technology and data and sensing and situational awareness play a really big role. I'll end with the connection to sustainability, right? So sustainability in my mind, and I apologize for the gross oversimplification, sustainability is essentially expanding the scope of what we're trying to preserve. Safety is about preserving us as people. Sustainability is about the environment. And as with anything, when you make the scope larger and you make the scope more diffuse, people sort of lose even more how they can help preserve the environment, because it's just such a more diffuse concept. But I think it's a strong contention to say that the ideas that we get from how we use data and technology to make us smart and proactive about getting ourselves safer in our working environments can now be extended to say, how can we actually involve all of society to kind of collaboratively be able to share data, to be able to get intelligence on how they can make an impact on society, right? And I'll end with the final sort of punchline, going back to what Chris said at the very beginning. Technology has always been reductive. It says, take a big problem, break it into a small problem, and optimize that. Unfortunately, people issues and environment issues are not unidimensional issues. They require the whole of us to play a part. So when I want a worker to be safe, I want them to do good quality work, but I want them to do it safely. I cannot split their mind and their cognitive abilities into different parts. So it is the purpose of technology to not be reductive in terms of people's attention, but bring them together in a flow, so that keeping themselves safe and productive is not a competition. It's actually a synergistic activity. I'll stop there. And,
yeah, thanks, Mike. That's really interesting, because I can see one of the panelists' question, which is really about people and technology acting as an inspirational piece. So I'm going to pose this to the panel. I mean, anybody can take it, and then I do have a very, very interesting and important announcement to make at the end of it. So I'll ask you and request you to just hang in there for the last final announcement. We've got another 8 minutes to go. So this is Louise Barry's Wright's question, and her question is, how do you inspire a health and safety culture remotely, though? Long term, most businesses are moving towards a remote way of working. And how does technology act as an inspirational piece? How can it inspire those using to engage with health and safety rather than act as a tick box? I know we have touched upon this, but if there is any of you who wants to kind of talk about, yeah, there you are, Chris. Thank you. Yeah.
My microphone back on. Yeah, I saw the question, and I think it is a very good question, in that one of the challenges with health and safety in the field is visualization, and that is an area particularly where technology can help. One of the reasons people don't do the right thing is that not having a clear perception around risk and hazard and how they work. And by using technology, you can create a greater connection within the organization. That means that you can get your technical experts easier by embracing the technology. But to do that, you need leadership in the field. You need good supervision. You need to embrace the use of technology throughout the hierarchy of the organization. And I do want to come back on one of Manik's points around using the analogies around driving. So for me, one of the very strong things is they did a test a few years ago in South London where they removed the central line distinguishing between the roads, and they reduced the speed down that road by 40%. And the reason for that is the guideline in the middle of the road gives people comfort, and it gives people false comfort. By taking it away, they're more cautious and more aware of their environment and take a better approach to delivering that. So the risk is with technology enables the application of more rules, and actually to embrace the video technology allows you, I think, to take a lot of those rules away and allows you to be more intelligent in the field. And people on the front line don't want layers and layers of rules. They want to be trusted to do the job. And by increasing the connectivity, you can increase the levels of trust.
Thanks so much, Chris. Final set of questions for the panelists. So what is the one practical thing you would advise the audience, which I believe we have people from 10 different countries in the event today. What is the one practical thing that you would advise the audience to go away and do to improve safety culture in a post-COVID world? I'm happy for Jaideep or Nigel or whoever wants to take the question first.
Yes, so I think the biggest thing is that we've been out of connect with people for quite some time. So when you go back, just remember to go through what is happening around you. Be appreciative that there are still all those hazards around you still existing. So not to forget that, and just to bear that in your mind, and also refresh it with your colleagues. The companies may not be able to do all the refresher trainings, etc., but at least from your own side, be very aware. All those risks which you had before you left work will still be there when you come back. You just need to be very aware and not forget those.
Thanks, Jaideep. That's really, really useful. Nigel?
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I mean, I think what we've seen looking at our data in the past is when people come back from holidays, that's typically the point at which they're most prone to have an accident. And as we go through these transitions, such as they are in the UK, and there'll be different sets of circumstances, I think we need to think very deliberately about what does that mean in terms of risk to the workforce, and make sure that everybody's got a heightened awareness that something is going to be different.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, no, I think I'll piggyback on that idea to say, in addition to asking people to comply to processes, I think a good refresher or reminder would be to deliver through technology inline examples of what compliant or non-compliant behavior looks like. And, as opposed to saying, well, be careful not to do the following things when you have a trench, potentially deliver for them an experience which shows them through a picture or through a video that this is what you used to do, and this is what bad looks like. So when you go about recording your video as to how you're doing it, it's important for you to just view what the bad stuff is. And I think it prevents us from splitting our attention and, having it be an inline experience.
Yeah, thank you. Any last thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, I would just implore people to go and find your champions. Go and look into your organization for people that are looking for better outcomes rather than focusing on outputs. And by doing that, you will embrace the change and the utilization of the technology. I always believe, and Nigel is possibly an example counter to this, but you need owners in the business that have the problems and deal with the problems on the day to embrace the change and lead that change. And the IT departments can support that by facilitating the technology to deliver better outcomes. So I would implore people to go and find those champions that are looking for better outcomes.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm just going to read the final chat from Patricia, who's one of our attendees today. I think that's a fantastic end to the session. She said that as folks are no doubt aware, this is the first time since the Industrial Revolution that there are 5 different generations of people in the workforce. It's important to be aware of the level of support required to get folks on board. That element of coaching is key, and the personal ability, I'm sorry, I'm reading fast. The personal ability to relate to people that older generations have need to be valued equally with the tech savvy whiz kids of today. And it's all about coaching, and it would, what about each of us coaching the other to share the wisdom and care for each other, and the need to recognize that there is no one solution, and different workplaces will have different contributing factors to how well they engage with them, health, safety, and sustainability. I think that's a fantastic observation to end the event on. Just a last quick couple of minutes, it's the final bits. And if you found today interesting, and as our commitment to society, and to all of you who have invested your time today, we'd like to make an offer to you. It's called the 124 offer. It's almost like my 1, 2, 3 cake recipe, but it is the 124 offer. What is the 124 offer all about? Week 1, we will invest our business process consultants and data gurus to review your current risk assessment process. Week 2, and that's the 2 out of the 124, we will recommend how you can simplify and combine the human with the digital and provide you access to our no-code platform for 2 weeks. And week 4, we will share the outcomes and analytics of the impact you as a business leader can make when you enable your frontline workers with simple to use technology like ours. And if there are any partners amongst the audience, because I do know there's some of our partners that signed up, we'll be happy to extend this offer to your client. But then there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? We need your help to help us. I mean, we need your help for us to help you. Click on the link in the chat below and provide us some simple details. And remember, the offer ends on March 31st. That's the end of the quarter. That's one date for you to remember. But there's another date for you to remember, and that's the note on which I'm going to end. Okay. We will be sending you a post-event email with the wrap-up, and we'll also send you a date for your diary for the next event in the Perspectives online series about work assurance in an uncertain world and the role of technology. And we will have an exciting lineup for you once again from different industries. Mark your calendars for the same time on April 22nd for the next online series event. So thank you very much to the speakers, and a very, very special thank you for the speakers here and for my team at Vyntelligence, especially the marketing team for pulling this together. And of course, thank you to all the delegates who joined us today. It's fantastic. A big round of applause. Please get yourself off unmute and please